Welcome to worship at Community of Joy. We're glad that you're joining us this morning. Surrounded by the love of God, we come to offer praise and thanks to the one who extends grace, who brings hope, who offers life. Let us celebrate the love of God shown through Jesus that surrounds us, connects us, and defines us as His. Let us worship God.
The atmosphere is changing now. The Spirit of the Lord is here. The evidence is all around. The Spirit of the Lord is here. The atmosphere is changing now. The Spirit of the Lord is here. The evidence is all around. The Spirit of the Lord is here. Overflow in this place. Fill our hearts with your love. Your love surrounds us. You're the reason we came to encounter your love. Your love surrounds us. Spirit of God, fall fresh on us. We need your presence. Your kingdom come, your will be done here as in heaven. Spirit of God, fall fresh on us. We need your presence. Your kingdom come, your will be done here as in heaven. Spirit of God, fall fresh on us. We need your presence. Your kingdom come, your will be done here as in heaven. Miracle can happen now. The Spirit of the Lord is here. The evidence is all around. The Spirit of the Lord is here. A miracle can happen now. The Spirit of the Lord is here. The evidence is all around. The Spirit of the Lord is here.
God, we come into your presence, surrounded by your love, grateful for your Spirit that moves in our midst, that works within, that allows us, Lord, to experience who you are. Maybe listen closely for your voice. May we come today eager to meet you here. And may we, as we indeed encounter you, offer you our thanks, our praise, our love, Lord, as we celebrate who you are and all that you bring out of love and grace and goodness into our lives. In the name of Jesus we pray. Amen. Our scripture this morning comes from Acts 3, and it's verses 1 through 11. Peter and John went to the temple one afternoon to take part in the 3:00 prayer service. As they approached the temple, a man lame from birth was being carried in. Each day he was put beside the temple gate, the one called the Beautiful Gate, so he could beg from the people going into the temple. When he saw Peter and John about to enter, he asked them for some money. Peter and John looked at him intently. And Peter said, "Look at us." The lame man looked at them eagerly, expecting some money. But Peter said, "I don't have any silver or gold for you, but I'll give you what I have. In the name of Jesus Christ the Nazarene, get up and walk." Then Peter took the lame man by the right hand and helped him up. And as he did, the man's feet and ankles were instantly healed and strengthened. He jumped up, stood on his feet, and began to walk. Then walking, leaping, and praising God, he went into the temple with them. All the people saw him walking and heard him praising God. When they realized he was the lame beggar they had seen so often at the Beautiful Gate, they were absolutely astounded. They all rushed out in amazement to Solomon's colonnade, where the man was holding tightly to Peter and John.
No mountain, no valley, no gain or loss we know could keep us from your love. No sickness, no secret, no chain is strong enough to keep us from your love, to keep us from your love. How high, how wide,
Couple of announcements as we're transitioning. May the 28th, which is the last Saturday of May, it is our turn to serve the meal, cook the meal, and serve the meal at God's Kitchen. And there is a sign-up sheet in the back for you to sign up how you would like to participate in that. It's a morning venture. We're usually done by about 1 or 1:30. I don't think they're letting them inside yet. I think it's a to-go, but we can do a hot meal, so we don't have to do a sandwich like we had in the past, but they're still not opening the inside to folks yet because of the virus. So we need your help for that. That's a couple weeks away, 2 weeks away to be exact from yesterday. And so please sign up there. Also, there's a sign-up sheet for mowing. I had announced that we had it cared for, but we're going to go back and do it a different way because Don is just not able to do that. And so we're going to put together a schedule of people to do that. There is a mower in the shed for you to use. And so if you want to sign that, if you haven't already, that would be great. In addition to all of that, next Sunday from 3 to 8 p.m. at Camp Mardella in Denton, Maryland, which is our church camp, they're having a Camp Appreciation Day. You can ride in kayaks, you can walk trails, you can sit around and enjoy visiting with people. There'll be music and campfires and food. So have at it. If you need directions, I'll be happy to give you directions. And then if you've got nothing to do, Wednesday night, there's not anything to do other than to observe, but if you want to see a really full Camden Community Garden, stop by between the hours of 5 and 7. Pinehurst is doing a reading and math night in the garden, and Grace and I will be there with them, and they have 276 people signed up for that already. Wow. It's in the garden, the playground, and the community center. We're going to just use it all. Parking will be in St. Francis back lot, so if you want to come on down and see the garden be full with kids learning and just excited and their families, 5 to 7 p.m. It's something we've done for a number of years in the garden. In the last 2, obviously, we didn't. We did last year via Zoom, and we had, 50 or 60 people, but it's nice to be able to get back and engage the kids in a learning activity. The staff at Pinehurst has worked really hard to put this event together, and it's exciting. I want to say congratulations to Whit Townsend, who graduated last Saturday with a bachelor's from University of South Carolina, and Tammy Brown, who's not here this morning, but she graduated this week from Warwick Community College with an Associates of Arts in General Studies and Honors. And we have one more to go in a couple of weeks, right? Yeah. So, awesome. I know. I mean, I remember when the Townsends walked through the door, and I can't believe that Whit graduated. Of course, I can't believe that my oldest is 30 either, you know. Yeah, it's crazy how fast time goes. So 8 years ago, when we started the Camden Community Garden, I saw it as a way to get the church outside the building, engaged in some kind of an activity on a neutral ground with people in our community. I saw it as an opportunity for the church to live into what I believe God has called the church to do, and that is to be an agent of love and blessing in the community and the world, God's love and blessing, period, no strings attached. But you know how it is in the church too often, and I'm not talking about Community of Joy necessarily, but in the church, too often we attach strings to everything we do, right? And our main motive then becomes to notch our Bibles, to get people to pray a prayer and sign on for Jesus, and that becomes the main motive. And it's not attractive. And it pushes people away. It was our first day in the garden, and one of our neighbors, Mary, stopped by and stood outside the fence. And I've talked about Mary before. She stood outside the fence looking in at us. And when I engaged her and told her my name, she told me hers. And then she asked if she could come into the garden. And I said, absolutely, Mary. It's a community garden. But I understand why she was a little bit confused about whether she could come in or not, because at that time there was and there still is a split rail fence all the way around the garden. Mary was in her 70s. She might have been 80 at that point. I don't know. I'm not a good judge of character, but she was long retired, and she was elderly, and she wasn't going to jump over the split rail fence. And then there was a cable that went from where the opening in the split rail fence was across the full opening. And so she was struggling with the idea of stepping over the cable. And so it was at that point that I realized that I needed to ask the city to shorten the cable and move the post in so that it became evident that you were welcome to come in. I mean, who knew what the Camden Community Garden was in the first few weeks? It was a vacant lot that suddenly became a garden, and no one knew. No one knew what it was or what it was about or if they were allowed to participate. And so we worked hard. And so Mary came in, and she came in that day, and almost immediately one of the folks who was there from our church told her that we were part of Community of Joy, and I was proud that she did that. And then she said to her, "And you should come to our church." It's like, whoa, we just met Mary. And I saw it when it happened. Mary got a look in her eyes, and she turned around and she quickly left. And it was weeks till I saw her again. So I pulled that person aside and I asked her not to ever do that again. I said, we had just met Mary, and we don't know anything about her, and we don't know what she's looking for or why she's here. And we certainly don't want word to get out on the street that the reason that the Camden Community Garden is here is so that Community of Joy can fill its pews or chairs. The outside community doesn't know we have chairs. Mary had no way of knowing that. As far as she knew, a church has pews, and so she thinks, we're there to do that, and that's why I think she left. And I didn't want that word. I didn't want that string to get attached to the reason that we were there, because I knew if that happened, the garden would fail. No one would come. Or they'd walk by, and if anybody was in the garden, we'd never be able to engage them or have any connection with our neighbors, because they'd say, "Oh, I can't go in there. They'll attach a string, so I'll have to watch until there's nobody in the garden, and then I can go." And then it feels like we're stealing, and I didn't want that either, because, we're there. Free veggies for the neighborhood is what the sign says, and it's our intent. Turns out that Mary was a faithful member at St. Francis, right across the street. I didn't learn that right away, but over time I got to know Mary. Because one day she showed up again, and I was weeding a bed, and I had my back to the sidewalk, and I just felt like I was being watched. And I turned around, and there was Mary. And as soon as I saw her, I said, "Hey, Mary, how are you?" And she engaged me, and she came in then. And we looked at the herbs, and turns out she was a former school teacher, and she loved gardening, and she was wanting to know what she could do. And so she took on the task for a couple of years of tending the herbs. Herbs that bloom and turn into seeds stop producing. And so Mary came down every week or so and took a pair of scissors and cut the seed heads off, so that the herbs would continue to be fresh and growing. And she loved doing that. And she and I had lots of opportunities to talk. But none of that would have happened if we had continued to keep that string attached. Sadly, exchanges like that first one we had with Mary happen way too frequently. And we in the church mean well, but we end up pushing people away rather than drawing them in. Too often we make assumptions before we listen to what they might want to tell us or what they might need, right? I mean, that person from our church assumed that Mary was there because she needed a church, or if she had a church, maybe she needed a better church. There's no such thing as a better church. I once heard an ad on the radio, "You've tried all the rest, now come to the best," and it was from a church. I'm like, that just doesn't fly. We're not competition. We're brothers and sisters. We're part of the same family. So we need to take time to not make assumptions, but to listen to what people want or need. In the passage that Pastor Sharon read this morning from Acts 3, I think we can get some help on how to engage people outside of the church. It was a regular daily occurrence for people in need to hang out outside the church in that day, right? Because they knew it was a great way to get help. So Luke is telling us this story about Peter and John on their way in through the temple gate, beautiful, on their way in to worship one morning, and they encounter this man who was born lame. And he's laying beside the gate asking for money, trying to make a living, trying to get what he needs to live his life. And every day he has friends who pick him up and carry him and put him at that gate so that he can ask for money from those who are going in to worship. So when he saw Peter and John on their way in, he asked them, "Can you give me some money?" It wasn't a strange occurrence. I suspect they expected that to happen. They would have not been surprised by it. So the first thing we notice is that Peter and John only respond to a request. Luke doesn't tell us that they engaged the man, right? He engaged them. So as they're going into worship, the guy says, "Hey, do you have some money that I could have? Do you have something for me?" The first thing we notice is that it's the person outside of the church who's engaging those who are going into the church. It's not the church engaging those outside the church to assume what they need. You see, they don't see the guy laying there and assume that they know what he needs or have what he needs and push Jesus on him. They're on their way in to worship, and the guy says, "Hey, you got some money for me?" Too often, we're guilty of serving someone in need, or seeing someone in need, or seeing someone and assuming that we know what they need and we have what they need, right? And we assume that that's Jesus. But as I told you in Mary's case, she had Jesus. I mean, I told you she was a part of St. Francis, and you might say, well, she didn't have Jesus. And we didn't know that at that point, but I did later learn that she indeed had Jesus. She had a long life with Jesus, and she had lots of beautiful stories that over time, as she came and deadheaded the herb, she told me about the ways in which she had lived her life and encountered the children and the love that she had for children, and the ways she liked to love them in Jesus, for Jesus, and with Jesus. I've encountered many people in my life who have been accosted by church people. Maybe you have. I have. Even after they learn that I'm a pastor. you know? And that's not something I quickly tell people because that changes the conversation. If, the what do you do for a living? Well, I'm a pastor. Oh, well. Can't talk to you. It happens. I've encountered many people who have been accosted by church people who make assumptions and push Jesus on people to attach strings, and then those people want absolutely nothing to do with Jesus and the church. I know I've told you before about my friend Joe. He was an alcoholic. He grew up in a very churched family. In fact, his grandfather was a pastor of a local church in the community where we served our second church. He had a wife who was a beautiful Christian lady who simply prayed for her husband every day because he was an alcoholic and because it was destroying their family life. Joe had been hurt so many times by well-meaning people in the church who knew that he was an alcoholic, who kept pushing Jesus on him again and again and again and again because they knew what he needed. And instead of getting him the help that he needed, they ended up pushing him away. And so he didn't come to church. He didn't have anything to do with the church, except he mowed the church's grass because he had a lawn mowing business in town and a snow plowing business in town. And he snow plowed the church's lot in the winter. And that's how I met Joe. We lived in the parsonage right next door to the church. There was a parking lot between the two buildings, and our office was in the church building. And so as I'd walk from the house to the church building, Joe would be out there mowing, and I would wave to him. And then sometimes he would stop the mower, and we would stand there and talk in the yard. I didn't push Jesus on him. I just asked him about his life and asked him about his family and asked him about things that might interest him. At that time, I can't remember who the race car driver was, 24. Jeff Gordon, thank you. He had a Chevy truck that he had painted to look like Jeff Gordon's car, and he had number 24 on it, So, I just asked about that. And it's been 25 years, and that's why I didn't remember who it was. I'm thankful that Troy knew who that was. But, we just talked about everyday common things. He had a John Deere tractor. I grew up on a farm that had John Deere's. You just find ways to chat. I never once asked him about his relationship with Jesus. I never once pushed. I just waved at him and chatted and went on my way. One night, Joe got a DUI. And God used that experience to get his attention. And it's interesting that he got a DUI because he lived right around the corner from the VFW. It wasn't even a mile from his house. But somehow they got him. And he said he deserved it. The next day, he came to my office and sought me out. Because this is what he said. He said, I was always so friendly, waving to him as he mowed grass and never pushing anything on him. He knew that this experience of the DUI was an opportunity to change his life, and he thought I could help him with that. And so he came, and we sat down in my office, and we talked for a couple of hours, and we prayed together. And then something happened in Joe. Jesus got a hold of his life, and he allowed Jesus to transform him, and he became on fire. He quit drinking. He went to AA. He started going around and sharing his testimony with people. He joined me in a small group that we had for men. Joe just lit up in a way that he wouldn't have if I had been pushing Jesus on him every time I saw him. He and his wife rectified their relationship. His wife was just beaming now on Sundays as she sat next to him, and she'd say, I've been praying for him for 50 years. think it was like 48 or so years. They celebrated their 50 right after we left, and we went back for it. His life totally changed. We could learn a lot from Joe and the man by the temple gate and Peter and John. Only respond to what people ask. Don't assume that we know best and push Jesus on them. A second thing we learn in this passage is to look at the person who is asking. When he asked them for money as they were going in, Peter and John were going in the temple, they stopped. They could have just reached in their pocket and thrown something at him. That's our approach most often, right? If we're going to give something to somebody who's asking for something from us, we reach in our pocket and we get a couple bucks out and we just throw it at them. They stopped. And they looked at the guy laying there and they said, "Look at us." Wow. They stopped. They recognized he was a person. And they engaged him. You know what happens most often when you encounter somebody who's on the street begging? They have this posture, right? And so they could have thrown money at him and they wouldn't have even known. He wouldn't have even known. Or they could have been talking to him and offered him something, and if he had his head down like this, so I think they said, "Look at us." Because they wanted him to see that they were people too. They wanted to engage him on a personal level. Now, the scripture doesn't tell us that, but I'm thinking that might be what happened. Because he's a person who has value and worth. He's not a project. He's not some invalid who's laying there because he wants to be laying there. He's looking for the church to help him. Because the church ought to be an agent of God's love and blessing in the community and world, right? That's what made Joe come, and that's what makes Peter and John do what they did. They saw a man, and they said, "Look at us. We don't have silver or gold to give you, but we will give you what we have. In the name of Jesus, get up and walk." It would have been so much easier to have thrown money at him and gone on. And then feel like they had blessed him. But that doesn't do anything. And recognizing people as people is an important thing for us to do. It's important to look at people as people and not projects. 2 of our 8 core values at Community of Joy talk about this. One is called a beloved mess. You know, life is messy. Our lives are a mess. And no matter how messy our lives are, we are beloved by God. And that makes us a beloved mess. Every one of us, myself included. No one has a perfect, clean life. Our lives are a mess. We make mistakes. We do things regularly that disappoint God, but we're beloved by him. The second core value that applies here is among the broken. We're called to live our lives among the broken. Jesus was often found among the broken, the outcast, the marginalized, the poor, those who grew up on the other side of the tracks. And we want to be found among them too. So only share when you're asked. And recognize the worth and value of every person that you encounter. Because every set of eyes that you look into is beloved by God. Just as much, not maybe more, than you. Beloved by God. And thirdly, note where the healing took place in this story. It took place outside the church. It didn't take place inside the church. One of the many reasons that we do Be a Blessing Sundays, which we just did 2 weeks ago, is to force us to go outside of the walls of our building, to be the church in the community, to be agents of love and blessing, to be sensitized to the needs of our community, to see things that go on in our community during the time frame that we're usually sitting inside these walls in these chairs, or as in the case of people at home, in the comfort of your pajamas and your living room watching. You know, we miss out on so much when we get into our routines, but when we break that routine and we go out into the community, we see things differently. And that's why we do them. Now, there's value in coming together here. Don't hear me say that we shouldn't ever come together. We should come together regularly. Because inside the walls of the building, we grow as community. We learn about God. We engage and how to engage community and apply what we learn about God inside the building when we go outside the building. Thursday night, I went to see the county executive forum. You know, we've got elections coming, and I hope you're paying attention because I can't tell you who to vote for, but it's an important time in the life of our county to be paying attention to the candidates and what they stand for and who they are, and to exercise a vote. The first primary, I think, is in July. It's not a typical time for us for primaries, and it's a time when most people don't want to go out and vote, but it's important. We've got school board, county executive, county council. It's an important time. So I wanted to be informed. So I went to Salisbury University to the county executive forum, and when I pulled in the lot, right behind me was Dave Harris. Now, Dave Harris used to be the vice principal at Pinehurst Elementary School. He's now at the Board of Ed, and between the time he got to the Board of Ed, he was a principal at North Salisbury. And so I've had lots of encounters with Dave Harris because we're faith-based partners at Pinehurst, and so he's one of the many administrators that we've worked with over the years there. And in addition, his mother was one of Emma's favorite teachers at Beaver Run. She is a sweet, sweet lady. And so, Dave pulls in, and we shook hands and greeted each other. And as we're walking into the forum side by side, he says to me, I want to get together. I want to get your church together with ours. Now, Dave's a part of Asbury United Methodist Church. And he said, I think I'm going to get Grace Murdoch in on this. And I said, well, she's a part of both. I don't know that he knew that. But anyways, I said, well, why? Why do you want to get our churches together? I mean, they're a big church, and we're a little teeny tiny church. And he said, because I think you guys can teach us a lot about putting our faith in action. I said, really? He said, yeah, I just love the way you guys show up in the community. And we need to learn how to do that better. I didn't say that. He said it. I said, well, Dave, I'd be happy to talk with you. I'd be happy to meet with you. I'd be happy to work with your church in whatever way we can. And I'm always looking for opportunities to get churches together, because I think that's a beautiful thing when churches, I've said a long time, surely God smiles when churches work together. Surely God smiles when churches work together. Yes. It warmed my heart that he thought little old Community of Joy could teach big old Asbury something. And it shouldn't surprise me that he thought that, because it is who we are. It is how we show up in the community and world. We show up all over with God's love, as agents of love and blessing, God's love and blessing wherever we are. And I'm so proud of us and how we do that, how we seek to really become love. We're not perfect at it, but it is who we are, and it is how we try to show up everywhere we go in this community and in our world. And I'm convinced more than ever that it will get us farther and make a greater impact in the world than simply staying in our holy huddles. Being agents of God's love and blessing in the world with no strings attached has gotten us to places and invited to conversations that the church doesn't normally get invited to since we started the Camden Community Garden. Our church is small, but because of who we seek to be and how we show up with love in our community, I am known as your pastor, and I am known as well as any big church pastor in this community. Meeting people right where they are, listening to their needs, loving them without strings, recognizing the worth and value of each person and not seeing them as projects is the way we show up and how we have a powerful impact in the kingdom of Jesus. Tuesday night, Grace and I showed up at the Board of Ed meeting for their dinner. They always, the elected board and some of the staff members always gather before the public board meeting and have a meal together. And I think that's a beautiful thing. The food services shows up and brings a wonderful meal. And we showed up there because we went to the March board meeting, and we had a presentation to make on kindness, and I think I told you shortly after that the public comment section of that board meeting was so nasty, so negative, so awful, that Grace and I walked out the door and said, we've got to do something to appreciate these elected board officials who are just getting pummeled by nasty people. And so we decided that we would go to Ugly Pie and we would use Kindness Commission money and buy each of the 7 elected board officials and the 2 top Board of Ed people who sit up at the table and are subjected to all this nasty stuff, $25 gift certificates to Ugly Pie, because we thought, we'd like to provide them a pie, and we don't know what kind they like, so we'll just give them $25. That'll cover most of the cost of a pie, and they can go and choose one. And so we did that, and then it wasn't long after we got an email saying that they'd have to give their gift cards back to us because they're not allowed to receive a gift over $20. And so I said, okay, well, let us make it 20. Let us give them back, and we'll go get them and turn them into $20 gift cards and give them back. And then we said, no. They said, no, we really would feel better not receiving them. So in a conversation with one of the board members, she gave us the wonderful idea. She said, why don't you come to the May meeting and serve us pie after the meal that the board provides for us? And we said, absolutely, we'll do that. So I emailed the food service director at the board level and said, Eric, we're going to bring dessert. Don't prepare dessert. Just bring your delicious meal, and we'll show up with Ugly Pie, and we'll show up with enough to serve everybody. And we had enough to serve the principal and the vice principal and the janitor and other people that were in the building, and it was beautiful. And so that was Tuesday night, and we had a little bit of time between that and the main board meeting. And so Grace and I went and got a bite to eat, and then we came back because they go into a closed session meeting first to deal with things that they can't deal with in public, and then they invite the public to come in. And so we went back because we had a kindness presentation where we were presenting the high schools and Choices Academy a Kindness Rocks and Smiles project kit that works at mental health. And May is Mental Health Month, and so that's why we were doing it this night. And so remembering how negative the public comments were 2 months before, I put my name down to be a public comment speaker. And I said to the lady there, I said, I know you do them in the order you get them, but I'd really like you to put my name last. And that way, if the comments aren't negative, I'll just say I pass. and don't have to take up anybody's time. But if the comments are negative, then I'll get up and say something positive. And so she said, okay, put an L on your form and give it to me. And so I did. You have to fill out this form, your name and address and phone number and what you're wanting to talk about. And so I was quite surprised in the public comment section. Actually, I wasn't surprised. I knew after the very first speaker that when they called my name, I was going to say something. And sadly, the first speaker's last name was Hutchison. Now, I thought it was Hutchinson because her husband was sitting next to her, and he had a hat on that had the name, above the little cutout in the back where you can put a ponytail out if you have one. And it said Hutchinson, and I wanted to say, my name's not the same as theirs, because she was really very dramatic and very negative. And I was quite surprised then when they called on me, like the fourth person, and they had said they had 7 speakers. And so I was like, daggone, I didn't get to be last. But I thought, it doesn't matter. It's already needed, so I'm going to get up. And so I stood up and I went to the mic and I said, I just am here to say thank you. To thank you who sit at these tables up in front of us for all that you do for our community and our children. And I said, I may not always agree with every decision you make, but I appreciate the effort that you put in to those decisions. And I realize that I look at things from my perspective, and you have to look at things from a whole host of other perspectives. And so I just want to thank you. And I went on further to say, and contrary to what we're hearing, I think that you have the best interest of our children and community at heart. I don't believe you have an agenda. I don't believe you're pushing things. I really believe that you care about our children. And I just want to thank you for doing that. And then I sat down. And there was applause. And then the next person that was called said, I pass. And then the next person got up and said, I know why that person passed. That's a hard act to follow. And I thought to myself, I have no idea of knowing whether it's true or not. But I wonder if the person after me passed because of the way I conducted myself. And she knew she wasn't going to conduct herself in that same way. Now, the person after her who didn't pass, who said I was a hard act to follow, didn't let that change the way he conducted himself. I mean, he said, this is a hard act to follow, and then he just started spewing the venom. And sometimes I think those people just get up there to hear themselves talk. There's a whole lot of better ways they could handle themselves, like call and make an appointment. Start at the administration level or the teacher level. Don't escalate it all the way to coming to a public comment section when you could have talked to the teacher or the administrator. And I knew that was the case in the first person, my cousin. I don't know if they are. And funny thing is, the mother, the one who is going on, is the mother of a cafeteria lady at Pinehurst who I've been calling cousin all these years because I knew her last name. And I didn't know that was her mother until afterwards when she came up and told me, hey, do you know Kelly? I'm her mom. And she had a grandson with her, and the grandson was saying, I told her not to say anything. I begged her. I'm in 11th grade, and I just said, please, my mom, don't talk till I get out of school. He did. And she said, I'm going to be there at next month's meeting. She said, it was something else. And I knew she was there just to hear herself talk because she started doing all these motions, and she would turn around to the crowd, and she was more animated than a preacher who is on fire. It was sad. And then a little while later, in the program, we had this presentation. That's why we were there at the meeting, to make this presentation of the Kindness, Rocks, and Smiles project to all of the high schools except Parkside, because we had already done it to Parkside because they were the launch of this program, and Choices Academy. And we made the presentation, and after the presentation was done, we called Dr. Hanlon down, who is retiring at the end of June. And we presented her with a gift and thanked her for her years of leadership and wished her well in retirement. And it was a beautiful thing to be seen again, supporting our leadership and appreciating our leadership. The next day, I got emails from board members thanking me for the love and appreciation that we have shown them, thanking us for the pie. That night, before we left, several of them made it a point to come up to us and thank us for the pie and the support. Because of that approach, I am confident that if I see an issue that needs to be addressed, all I have to do is ask for a meeting, and I'll be given one. Because they know I'm not coming in to spew a bunch of venom. Even if I don't agree with the whatever the issue is, there's a way to approach it. You see, the way we treat one another really does matter. It matters a whole lot. Carly, you knew it was coming, right? That's an inside joke. We went to hear Carly on Friday night sing, and she wrote a song. And she said, she told her parents she could never sing that song in front of Pastor Martin and Pastor Sharon because it talks about hating. And I said, I'm gonna work it right into my sermon on Sunday. And she didn't think I was. She said, no, you're not, because that scripture's not even about that. That scripture's about miracles. But, when we hate, we can't see love. And we can't be love. You cannot like something. You can dislike something. But you can't hate it and love it. I'm not busting on your song, but I just, you gave me a challenge. And I just want you to know I'm up to the challenge. Church, the world needs us. The world needs us to show up with love and blessing and no strings attached. Just like Peter and John showed up that day. And when we do that, people will see Jesus in a whole different light. And they'll be drawn to him. Because he's attractive. Because he's love. Because he has love. Because he doesn't hate. He loves everybody. And we represent him in the world, and we ought to represent him in that same way. So, how do you want to talk? What thoughts, what stories, I'll give you the microphone too, Carly, if you want.
Good morning, everybody. I am on my way to Asbury to meet my husband, so I do love coming to COJ.
Oh, sorry, I get it.
Good, I needed that.
Yep.
I'm glad you ended the mystery of why Dave Harris tapped me at the spaghetti dinner on Friday night and said, Grace, I want to get with you. So I've been thinking about that all weekend. And I love this, that they invited us, Martin, especially your church. Here's the deal. They also have a project of adopting an Afghan family.
Yep.
And they are housing them, and they are going to outfit the home with what is needed from bathroom supplies, kitchen supplies, furniture. So Charles Emery also approached me at the spaghetti dinner and said, I want you to talk to that guy, that pastor you're always, Martin, that's who I want you to talk to. So we're tapped. But I'm delighted because they can learn from you. there's a reason I come to COJ as well as go to Asbury. So I think how we do and how we do show up, and my association with this pastor has been a blessing since God put us together for that TEDx talk. So thank you.
Well, he put us together when Emma was in kindergarten and struggling.
True.
Emma, who's the world traveler now, was in kindergarten and struggling to be in kindergarten and crying her eyes out every day and had to have a picture of mom and dad laminated, and she carried it in her pocket. And now, we just visit her and she's living in Florida and she's off gallivanting around. That's when we first met you, and you were a significant person in Emma's life. You helped her in a big way, and so we are grateful. Thanks. You're excused. Go to Asbury.
I love how in the story, as you said, the healing takes place outside of the temple or outside of the church, but then it travels into the church and makes a whole lot of noise and gets everybody's attention and astounds everyone. And I just think that's so cool, because that happens when people from church go out into the community and do things, and it makes waves and gets everyone's attention. Then people who are standing around in their holy huddles are like, "What? You did what? They did what?" And they're all surprised. I'm like, "But this is how it's supposed to work." And I just think that particular story shows that little bit of "I see you," and that engagement, and then the healing that came because of it, flooded into the church and got everybody's attention.
Yep.
And said,
Yep.
"This is what the kingdom's supposed to look like."
Yep. Thank you for pointing that out.
I told Tammy I would share this story this morning. On my way here, I was talking to Tammy on the phone. They drove Kevin to the airport this morning to go back to Florida. So I'm driving along, and I look over at the garden, and the peas are climbing the strings. I said, "Oh my gosh, Tammy, the peas are climbing the strings."
And for those of you who don't know, Tammy and Terry spent the Be a Blessing Sunday putting the strings out. Yeah. It's amazing what happens when you love something.
Give peace a chance.
Yeah.
I worked with another therapist years ago who was like, she never mentioned her Christianity. You knew she was a Christian. She, like a little, thing here and there, but never pushed it. And we'd been working for 5 or 6 years, and so we knew each other's moods and everything. And I came in one day, and she said, "What's wrong?" Right away, I said, "A friend of mine was just diagnosed with stage 4 lymphatic cancer," and I knew that was a tough hill to climb for him. And she just says, "Well, what's his name?" And I gave her his name. She said, "I'll pray for him." And those weren't idle words for her. Some people say that in lieu of
Sure.
really doing anything, but that wasn't idle for her. And then she came to the following week and said, "Well, we prayed for Jay last Sunday at church. He got better. He went into full remission." I don't know how much it's only a question of how much it helped. Versus, it did no harm, but that's the way she was. And when we parted, unfortunately, when the company I worked for lost the contract and we all went our separate ways, I told Carolyn that she was one of those people who was a true credit to her faith. And she actually got upset. She said, "It's the nicest thing anyone could ever say to me." I realized that. And she said, the biggest barrier to Christianity's growth is Christians.
Absolutely.
I thought that was really,
I believe that.
and Christianity is not unique in that. It probably applies to other faiths as well. But and I remember, and further, like as far as outreach, when we were members at the Unitarian Church, and you and some other folks came over one Sunday, and I remember that because I was the greeter that day, and I was like, "That's really, really cool. That's interfaith. That's entwining the different faiths and different approaches, and realizing that we are all in this together." Thank you.
Yeah. I don't think I came one Sunday, but I was there for several meetings, but not on Sunday.
But there were some members of this church that did come over one Sunday.
Could have been. Yeah. I love these talk back times.
So I have a little story about the Be a Blessing Sunday and
Uh-huh.
how it extended past that Sunday.
By the way, I still have the grabbers and trash can.
Awesome. I'm glad you do. They're my personal ones, and I enjoy using them to pick up pine cones because my old back doesn't like to bend over.
Well, they're yours when we're leaving here. So anyhow, that following Wednesday, I went into Easton to work, and I'm driving home, and I never go down Nanticoke Road to go home. I always go down Rockawalken, so it's, because it's so much closer. And so I'm driving home, and I just had this thought that I needed something at Dollar General. And I'm like, what do I need? But I had this nagging drive to go to Dollar General. So I was like, okay. I went to Dollar General on Nanticoke Road, and I stopped, and I'm walking in, and I have this woman stop me. She's like, can you help me? I said, yeah, if I can, yeah, sure. And she had accidentally locked the key to her son's car inside the car because it was an older car, didn't have one of the remotes, and it automatically locks when, So there's the key sitting on the front seat. And so it was me and one other guy that were trying to help her. And so I go into Dollar General to maybe try find something to push the little button down because her window was down just ever so slightly. And we're trying, and this guy was like, you know what? If I can pull the window out just slightly more, he said, I might be able to find something to pick that key up. And I was like, oh, I have an idea. I still had these grabbers in my car. And so he was able to pull the window just out far enough, not to damage it, but to be able to pull it out far enough. We were actually able to get the grabber in there and get the key for her. So that'd be a blessing Sunday. It was like, you know what? That's why I forgot to give that stuff back to you, because it was needed still. And it's just amazing how God will use that extension, those little moments,
Absolutely.
if we're able to go past that. And she was so grateful. She's trying to give me something, and she's like, I said, look, just pass it on. I said, that's the love of Christ. Pass it forward. And she said, you know what? I work at the hospital. If you ever need a good phlebotomist, come to me. So I thought that was a great story to be, go
Thank
above
you.
and beyond that.
Thank you for sharing that. And everybody needs a set of grabbers now, right? They're $1.25 at the dollar store. That's where I got them. Actually, that's a Dollar General, right? I got them at the Dollar Tree. Yeah. Anyone else? Any online? Okay. Our final song.
1, 2, 3, 4. You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you. I worship you. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are here, touching every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, healing every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, turning lives darkness, my God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. 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 You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are.
Remember, in Matthew's gospel, Jesus says, whenever you did it to the least of these, you did it to me. So brothers and sisters, with eyes wide open as we go out into this community, let us engage Jesus as we engage each other, as we recognize the personhood and worth and value of all those that we come in contact with. Let us love with an unconditional love like Jesus does. Go in peace. Amen.